Good morning. Oh, it's really hot this morning. There we go. Good morning. Hello. If I can have your attention, ding dong. How about that? Little singing, never hurt anybody. Folks, if you can come in and get settled, it would be really helpful because I know we're going to Jerusalem with Paul, which means just buckle down. I want you to fasten your seatbelts, and because this plane is getting ready to take off. And there'll be a lot for him to discuss and still make it so he can get his extra steps in running to the sanctuary. So please sign in the attendance rosters. If you have not already done that, do that at your convenience. We've got a sheet, like if your class is not on the table, just go to this, sign the last sheet, and that way we'll know that you are here. This is our last class of this. Next week, the singles are starting a 4-week series with Scott Gilpin on generosity. So if you don't have a class or you want to, step into the singles, by all means. And I know Pathways is going to be back in their space. What are y'all studying, Ann?
Dealer's choice.
Dealer's choice. Okay, so Pathways, but they're in their room. So I just want, I know those two classes. Yes, in your new room. And what? Aldersgate is back in their room? Okay. JOY is back. Crawford Owen never left. So some of their members left, but no, came here, but no. Crawford Owen is in Crawford Owen. I teach the Bible study class, and on the 13th of August, which is 2 Sundays from now, we're beginning the book of Ruth. And just to have you think about it, just because that's who I am, I want you to cogitate why Ruth is where it is in the Bible. Have you ever thought of why the Old Testament looks the way it does? So just kind of find Ruth. It's towards the beginning. Then the other thing is we've got the 13th of August is going to be our kickoff Sunday. So there's going to be food trucks and a photo booth and I think a cornhole championship, but you need to get your teams in. So, and I think it'd be a real shame if the only teams coming for the cornhole were those under the age of 30. Certainly there are a few people, not me, but there are a few people who have eye-hand coordination that could do this. And then in the 16th of August, which is our first Wednesday night supper back, and we have a special speaker coming who will talk about children and the internet. So even though you may not have children, you may have grandchildren. This may be something that you really need to pay attention to. And they'll also be speaking to our younger children that night. That speaker will. And then we begin our emotionally healthy relationships, and our emotionally healthy spirituality classes begin the second Tuesday of September. And we'll have those classes from 9 to 11 in the morning and from 6 to 8 that night. And if you have not had the opportunity to do this, it has been deeply meaningful to so many people. And I think, let's see, if you've taken the class, raise your hand. We had a bunch. We got Tom Ohm, we've got Nancy Glaub. You can talk to them about what they think about the class. And I would say the first emotionally healthy spirituality is to deepen your relationship with God. And we do it around small tables, so you have the same table mates every week. And as Keith said last week, the first week everyone's sort of kind of looking at each other. Really the questions are not hard. And yes, Tom?
If you don't take one or both of these classes, you are missing a terrific experience. Both of these classes are absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul McCracken.
Well, good morning, and as Annie says, this is going to have to be fast and furious. Because, you know, Jerusalem's history only goes back 5,500 years, and we'll dive in best we can. But there's no city like it on earth. Before we hit Jerusalem, though, we want to catch up one thing from last week. There was a discussion about how long it took to get to Jerusalem from Galilee, whether you went through Samaria, or today the West Bank, or Jordan River. Have made that trip several times. If you go through Samaria, because it is so mountainous, the roads are so winding and curving and switchbacks, it takes almost 5 hours to get from Galilee to Jerusalem. If you go over to the Jordan River Valley and go right down Highway 90 and then up to Jericho to Jerusalem, it's about an hour and a half. That's today. I mean, the cars and buses, not, you know, walking. So that was I forget who brought up the question, but it was a real good one. Back to Jerusalem. The place where it is believed that the veil between heaven and earth may be the thinnest. It is sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And we're going to hit highlights of its history. No way to do the whole thing, but we're going to hit several. Jerusalem started as a small, about 3-acre, obviously I'm doing something wrong here, Amos. There we go, nope. A small 3-acre settlement on the hillside. Now, if you're going to have a settlement, you need 3 things. The first one is a reliable source of water. Which one? I'm pressing the wrong thing. Top button. I thought that's what I did. Okay, thank you so much. You have to have a reliable source of water. People can't live without water. And in Jerusalem, it's this spring, the Gihon Spring. Gihon is Hebrew means rushing. It was actually the primary source of water for Jerusalem until the 1940s. But you have to have a reliable food source. And as you can see, Jerusalem is right on the edge of this border where it's forest. Now, when they say forest, we're not talking about, you know, pine trees and oak trees. You know, we're talking about olive primarily. Although the British planted, when the British controlled Palestine in the early 1900s, they planted tons of pine trees. So there are a lot of pine trees. They're just not very old. But it is a very arable, good place to grow food. And the area must be defendable. Because you've got a good spot, you got your food, you got your water, somebody else may want to come get it. And Jerusalem started up on this little 3-acre spit of a mountain right here. But as you can see, you have deep valleys on the 2 sides, but not up here. Every time the city of Jerusalem was captured from the Babylonians to the Israelis in 1967, it's come from the north, but you don't have the valleys. Always fallen from attacks from the north.
Is that little area shown on that first picture? Could you use the pointer to show, when you showed with the dome and the Western Wall on that very first picture, which part of that is?
Okay, good question. That's this area right up here.
So that's where the Western Wall and...
Right.
Okay.
And we'll look at that a little later. Oh, then this is our little 3-acre Jerusalem up through the time of David. And the Gihon Spring is, if you can see it over here, is right down here. They had to build a wall out around the spring because the spring is actually right at the base of that mountain. Our history of Jerusalem goes back at least to 3500 BC, where they have found a small settlement existed by the spring. You learn how to date things, date a site by the pottery. Pottery changes over the years, and even small fragments such as this can be very helpful. Pottery changes over the years, but it changes fairly uniformly. So if we find a pot or a dish that is in a certain shape, an archaeologist, trained archaeologist, will know approximately from what era it came. And it's also really great because you have to, they use pottery all the time for storing, cooking, everything else, but it's very fragile. It breaks easily. But ironically, these very fragile pots are made of an almost indestructible material. So the shards will last for thousands of years. They were very common. People often that's what they use for scratch paper. We find a lot of shards with writing on them. We call them ostrakhan. But that is how a site is dated, by the type of pottery used. Is it on a wheel? How is it fired? That sort of thing. 2500 BC, early Bronze Age, some first houses. Israel had a big deal back in 2000, claiming the 3,000th anniversary of Jerusalem. No, Jerusalem's a whole lot older, but that's when David, they're kind of like only counting it when they got there, when David captures the city. 1850 BC, we have the first mention of Jerusalem in Egyptian execration text. Execration text is a curse. And we find people in Egypt and this is such a text, are fussing about Jerusalem. And then 1800, the first city wall that we've been able to find. Jerusalem is difficult to deal with archaeology because it's been lived in so long. And our archaeology is unfortunately a destructive science. You have to dig down through things. And sometimes that means if people are living there, they may not want you digging down through their house. A lot of stuff was discovered when Israel captured the old city of Jerusalem in 1967. They had no problem bulldozing down Palestinian homes. That didn't bother them a bit, and did a lot of archaeology then. We've also had a settlers group in the Gihon Spring area who for the last almost 20 years, frankly, some pretty illicit means of getting people's houses from them and tearing them down and doing some study but building Jewish homes in their stead. But Jerusalem is hit and miss on archaeology, because where you can't dig. It is known in early text as either Jebus, or the city of the Jebusites, or Salam. Salam was not, some people say, well, that's Shalom. No, that's a nice thought. Salam was a deity, local deity. But again, that little 3-acre spot here. And 1400 BC, Jerusalem is mentioned in several of the Amarna letters. Archaeologists, as I've said many times, are brilliant people. They can discover all this stuff. They're lousy at naming things. They found a bunch of letter correspondence in the city of Amarna, the Amarna letters. And they do that over and over again. It's not very creative, but these were fabulous finds. It's over 400 letters written during the reign of two pharaohs, Amenhotep III and IV, and the record of the royal correspondence. So it had all these correspondence from all over the Middle East. Jerusalem, known as Jerusalem at the time, but we know it was not a huge city, but it was a significant city. It was a major city. 1200 BC, the biblical story comes into play. Israelites invade Canaan, but they're unable to take Jerusalem. They have the rest of the Holy Land, but they're not able to take Jerusalem. It's too strongly defended until roughly 1000 BC. Jerusalem is captured by David. It's an interesting story. David is at Hebron, is where he has his headquarters, and they anoint David king over Israel. So he decides, we're going to take Jerusalem. The reason that Jerusalem was significant, it was not inside the territorial borders of any of the 12 tribes. It was sort of like Washington, D.C., a neutral city on the borders there. Well, the Jebusites said, you can't get in here. We could be blind and lame and drive you back. It's too well defended. But David did take it. And notice the thing, it says, okay, they got out of line. Got a sequence here. Well, okay, whoa. All right, let's go back here. There we go. But David did capture the city. We'll look at that in a minute. And he built the city all around from the Millo inwards. The Millo is a great wall, and part of it's still standing. Now, it's an incredible jumble because part of this wall was built during the time of David. Some was part of when Nehemiah rebuilt the wall later. There's some of that. There's some structures from Hezekiah's time, and it's just a jumble. But part of this wall, again, we call it the stepstone structure because the stones look like steps. Naming is not our thing. But part of this was, in fact, built by David. Now, it says, whoever struck down the Jebusites said, let him give up the water shaft to attack. You know, if they're blind and lame, go get them. But we've got to get up the water shaft. What water shaft? So we thought for many years it was this shaft right here. It's called Warren Shaft. And then about 10 years ago, they did a geological survey and study and said, yeah, this didn't exist in 1000 BC, so this is not how they got it. We don't know. There's a word, Sinar, that is translated as a pipe or a shaft, but that's a very questionable translation. Usually, when you're translating old text, you see how a word is used in context, and you can see how often it's used, and what different contexts it's used, and that gives you a better understanding. This word is used once. It's only in this verse that they got in through the Sinar. No idea what that means. It might mean water shaft, it might mean something else. Anyway, that's how David got in. So anyway, David's city, again, just on that 3-acre spur, but it's not till Solomon that the city really starts to grow. David dies approximately 970 BC. Solomon becomes king and doubles the size of the city. Of course, much of that was taken up by both the temple and Solomon's palace. So the city actually didn't grow that much, it just built those two incredible structures. And here's an aerial view of the city today where you can see here's our little 3-acre spur, the original city. And Solomon's palace would have been in this area. The temple would have been here, but the wall would have been just above it. You were asking about the Western Wall earlier, it's right there. Of course, the temple is what Solomon is best known for. Incredible structure, lasted for several centuries. And what they did is, it's at the summit of a mountain, but you don't want to have people standing on the sides, so they would raise it up, rose a platform, and built the platform that you build the structure on. And now here's a fascinating theory. Where the temple sat today stands the Dome of the Rock, Islamic mosque, commemorating the spot where Muslims believe that Muhammad took a night journey in a vision to heaven, that he left from here. The man standing in front of it is an Australian gentleman named Lean Rittenmeyer, delightful guy, very knowledgeable, probably knows more about the Temple Mount than any person on earth. And he started looking at photographs and said, I think I see something here. Now, you can't go into the Dome of the Rock and take measurements. They don't want you to walk around the rock. Actually, since 2000, non-Muslims have not been able to go into the Dome of the Rock at all. We used to. When I first started going to Israel, you'd go in, they'd ask you not to take cameras and to leave and take your shoes off. Other than that, you could walk all over. There's a chamber underneath. You could go down. It was a great place to visit. But as far as, again, taking up measuring tape and stuff, not so much. Well, Lean found some diagrams and some photographs. And what he noticed is that it looked like there were remnants of a foundation trench on 3 sides, like a building had been there. And then inside that area, he found this rectangular depression that had been carved out of the stone. And again, you're doing approximation of measurements from a photograph. It's not exact, can't prove it. But it's the same size as the Ark of the Covenant. So Lean believes the Ark of the Covenant, that was carved out, put the Ark of the Covenant on this spot. So, I don't know if he's right or not, but it's a fabulous theory, and it's fascinating. Another view of it. I'd love to be able to say, yes, that's exactly where the Ark was. Maybe. It's a nice thought. Okay, 721, the Assyrians invade Levant, or the land of Canaan, and make the northern king a vassal state, later destroy it. They're not able to catch Jerusalem. Look at this incredible empire the Assyrians built, but never able to capture Jerusalem. Kings, political spin is nothing new. Kings would have all kind of, we call them stele, talking about how powerful and wonderful they were. And this particular one says, I trapped Hezekiah. I pinned him up, caged him like a bird in the city of Jerusalem. That doesn't mention I couldn't capture the city, but we have him trapped. We have him surrounded. So, the Assyrians were able to be so effective for 2 reasons. One, they had the ancient world's equivalent of the doomsday device. They had the battering ram. They were the first ones to use that, and they just come knock your walls down. They also used terror as a means of war, where they would put prisoners on spikes, torture them in plain view. They wanted you to see this. The idea is, you're messing with us, this is going to happen to you. And there's even one part where Hezekiah is penned up in Jerusalem, and it's also, in a sad way, it's kind of funny, because the Israelites call out, would you please stop scaring our people? If you're going to speak to them, don't speak to them in Hebrew, speak, in Aramaic. So the leader's going to understand you, but the general people can't. And they went, no, that's kind of the point, is to scare all these people, so we'll keep using Hebrew, thank you. But they were a very effective, powerful army. Incidentally, this particular drawing is a piece of a long wall depicting the Assyrian army killing, destroying, and torturing people. And that was the wall that visitors would use to enter into the palace. So you're going to come talk to the Assyrian king, and all you're seeing are these images of what the Assyrians do to people. A little intimidating. Now, when the northern kingdom fell, we always talk about the 10 lost tribes. A lot of the tribes disappeared. Actually, a lot of them came to Jerusalem. So the city had to be expanded. All this wall was added by Hezekiah to encompass the new population. By the way, there's even an echo of this in the story of Jesus' birth. Do you remember when Mary and Joseph take Jesus to the temple to have him dedicated? And there's a priestess there who recognized, oh, this is the Messiah. And she was from the tribe of Asher. Just mentioned she was from Asher, which was one of the 10 northern tribes. Her ancestors, 800 years earlier, had come to Jerusalem as refugees from the Assyrians. Now, part of this wall is still there. This cuts right through the old city, and it's a fascinating thing. But this is part of the wall built by Hezekiah of course, later destroyed or knocked down by the Babylonians. Not sure. Oh, Hezekiah also did something else. The Gihon Spring, as I pointed out, is over here. Well, now the city's over here. How do you get the water over there? So what Hezekiah did, a brilliant engineering piece. It's called Hezekiah's Tunnel. And what they did is they had people digging from each side of the mountain and digging towards each other. Now you see, it's not a straight tunnel. It's all over the place. So what we're pretty sure they did is found natural fissures and would connect them. And it's believed they would be up on the city above and beating with iron rods on the stone so they would know, okay, we need to go this way. But they met in the middle. You see the little where it says meeting point. I got to go through Hezekiah's Tunnel several years ago. It's a lot of it is not 6 feet high, so you're going bent over. Yeah, I love this picture. That towards the end, it's a little wider and a little higher, so you have all these smiling faces. It's about a 45-minute walk. So if you would like to recreate this experience, stand for about 45 minutes in ice water up halfway up your thighs, bent over for most of the time, and about every 10 minutes, hit yourself in the head with a rock. But it was fabulous. Glad I got to do it. All right. Back to the Assyrians. Now, in 600, the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar replaced Assyria as the world's superpower, built a great empire, and they were able to capture Jerusalem and destroy it. We talk about the Babylonian captivity. It sounds like everybody in the land of Israel gets taken to Babylon. Only the elite, only the priest and upper class, ruling class. Other people, common people, were left behind. When the Babylonians captured it, we found that the Babylonians used an incentive program for their soldiers because each of these arrowheads has the soldier's name, what division or brigade he's in, and his leader. So they would take the arrows from the dead bodies and you got a bonus for each enemy soldier you killed. Cyrus the Great forms the Persian Empire in 550 BC, and in 539 they defeat the Babylonians in a single night. The Persian Empire was the largest of the world up to that time. They had a Pony Express system of mail delivery. It was actually a very advanced empire. But Cyrus allows all exiles in Babylon, including Jews, to return to their native lands. Now, some did. Small groups of Jews journeyed from Babylon to Jerusalem over the years, but most stayed. We see this in the book of Esther, where Esther and her uncle are living in Persia. She becomes the wife of the Persian king. There are a lot of scholars who believe that the wise men were not Gentiles, but Jews. Why would, if they weren't Jews, why would they care as the king of the Jews had been born? So these scholars were Jewish scholars from Persia who came to see what has happened here. In 515, after an interruption in building, the second temple is built under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Joshua, and I just put that up there because I like to say Zerubbabel, descendant of David, and Joshua was a descendant of Zadok, the high priest, when the first temple was built. It's actually it's many years later before Nehemiah comes. If you read Ezra and Nehemiah, it sounds like they're bang, bang right together. Many years later before Nehemiah comes, and he is given permission to rebuild the walls of the city. And archaeologically, they slapped them up fast. They're not really, you can tell the Nehemiah's walls, they're not really well built, but it's better than nothing. And they got it up there and they got it done. So here we go with, we start off with original city down here. Solomon adds all this. Hezekiah brings it out to here. And in the later years, it goes further west. It always goes west. It never goes east because the Kidron Valley is very, very steep. So you always build towards the west or north. So here's what the city would look like in this period as it's being expanded. And for 200 years, it's a small town in the Persian province of Judah and lives relatively peacefully. Then comes a guy named Alexander the Great, who captures, everything. And they become part of a Greek empire. When Alexander died, his empire was divided among 3 of his generals. And Judah becomes part of the Ptolemaic Empire. This is from the ones ruling Egypt, a family that would later include Cleopatra. Okay, that was interesting. What? Got it. Yeah, go away. What in the? I'm scared to say anything now. Anyway, Judah is captured in 198 from. Wow. Okay, let's get it going. So I got to get a sanctuary in a few minutes anyway. Judah's captured by the Seleucids, who ruled from Syria. And there's how the empire was originally divided. The green was the Seleucids, the orange down here was the Ptolemies. In 175, a man named Antiochus Epiphanes becomes the leader of the Seleucid Empire. This guy thought very highly of himself. Epiphanes means the divine one. But he reversed a policy they had had of religious tolerance and actually outlawed the practice of Judaism, to the point where if you were caught not working on Sabbath, you could be put to death. If you were caught keeping kosher with your food requirements, you could be put to death. And this one's horrible. If a baby boy was circumcised, the baby would be strangled. And the other end of the rope tied around the mother's neck, and she would have to carry the dead body. It was a terrible period. This is the period of time when the book of Daniel's written, and you can tell it's Daniel's written during a time of great persecution. Then, just to make things worse, Antiochus loots and desecrates the temple. He sacrificed pigs inside the Holy of Holies. This is known in Judaism as the desolating sacrilege. Jesus refers to it. And, of course, the Jews revolt. They're beaten back. Then he installs a statue of Zeus in the temple, and they said, no, I did it. So another revolt started out, led by a man named Mattathias and his 5 sons. These are the Maccabees, the Maccabean revolt. And their family rules Israel for many years as the Hashmonean dynasty. 164, the Hashmoneans take Jerusalem, they cleanse the temple. This is what we have celebrated at Hanukkah each year, the purification of the temple. And finally, the Seleucids were driven out, and Judah had a period of relative independence. They added on to the temple. There we go, there's their addition. You can even see it on the eastern wall of the city because you've got a straight line in the wall right there. So all this was rebuilt from Solomon's temple, and now we have the Hashmonean addition down below. 2 of the Hashmonean brothers, you have 2 princes who are, their dad dies, so which son's going to become king? Well, they're having all this bitterness and conflict. So they both decide to bring the Romans in on their side. The Romans say, no problem, we're coming in. So the Romans don't have to capture or conquer anything. They're invited in, and now they take over, going into in the 1st century BC. The Hashmoneans still ruled Judah, but as Roman vassals. In 40 BC, the Parthian Empire to the east, which roughly Persia, captures Judah. Herod does two things. He gets an army of mercenaries put together by his best friend, a guy named Mark Antony. You've heard of him. But Herod goes to the Roman Senate and says, we're putting together this army. The Romans have never beaten the Parthians. My army will defeat them, and if you will name me king of the Jews. Well, it didn't cost Rome anything. They said, sure, you're king of the Jews, go. And in a long, bloody war, Herod is actually able to capture the country, and in 37 BC becomes the actual king of the Jews and rules until 4 BC when he dies. Now, this is Herod's Jerusalem. He built it to a magnificent city. He added a lot of things that they never had before. Of course, a lot of things the Jews didn't like. They didn't like they had theaters or gymnasiums. That was bad. But he did bring in and built the great temple. We don't have time to really get in the temple today. Okay, crass public announcement, or whatever. I've got a program on the temple, just the temple itself, that I would love to come to your Sunday school class and share, because it is absolutely incredible what they did with this building and how it's the largest structure ever built on earth for the worship of God. St. Peter's in Rome would fit inside of it 2.5 times. And it's just an incredible. When we see all the Pharisees wondering, what if the Romans come and tear down our temple? They didn't want that. They love that temple. They're so proud of it. And they should have been. Now, time has caught me, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through, so sorry we didn't get there. But this gives you some of the history of Jerusalem, some of the people involved, some of the factors that go into making the city what it was and what it is. Got to show you one more picture, and I'm going to blow through it. Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70, but rebuilt by the Emperor Hadrian. You know Hadrian's Wall in England, same emperor. And I'm going to blow through to get to a picture or a statue of Hadrian's. This is all simple stuff. It's good. I promise. Sometime we'll do it. That's Hadrian. Am I crazy? Doesn't that look not exactly like Sam Williamson? I think Sam's got some Roman emperor blood in him. I'm telling you. So, I couldn't leave without showing you that picture. And Paul's back there grinning. So I hope she's happy. Forgive me for having to dash off. Do need to go to work, but I know some of you have been to the Holy Land. Some of y'all go in this hall. Jerusalem is amazing. It's crowded, it's noisy, and it was 2,000 years ago too. But it's an incredible experience, and I'm thrilled that you're getting to do that. Let's pray together. Holy God, we thank you for the world in which you've given us, the incredible places, the incredible things that have taken place. Help us to learn from these that we are part of a long story, and a story that we put in your hands. I ask you to bless each one here, Lord. Grant them a safe journey to their homes. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank y'all, excuse me. I got to figure out what happened with this.
It does.